This is Talk the Devils, the athletic show dedicated to Manchester United. No football to talk about, unfortunately, because Manchester United haven't played since our last episode, but a big story nevertheless to speak about. We're going to react on this episode to the comments of the United owner, Sir Jim Ratcliffe. It's caused so much controversy. Obviously, so many people have had their say. Fans, politicians, rival managers, even the club themselves releasing a statement. So we will assess what's been said and we will assess the impact on Manchester United, and also towards the end of the podcast we'll also have a little roundup of what has been going on the football side of things as well. I've got Critch and Laurie with me here in the studio. Andy's joining from home as well. I'm sure by now everyone will be aware of what Sir Jim Ratcliffe has had to say, but just to set it out, he gave an interview last Thursday with Sky News where he said that he believed the UK had been colonised by immigrants. He was speaking at the European Industry Summit in Antwerp, where he also talked about the political, social and economic challenges that he believed the UK is facing at the moment. He commented on the number of people who have been claiming benefits, which has since been challenged. Also, the UK population as well, another thing which has been challenged as well. We've had a huge reaction to this. Thank you for everyone for sharing your comments, whichever side of this conversation that you are on. The Prime Minister's had a say. The local mayor's had a say, you name it, and we'll talk about all of that as we go through. First of all, Laurie, I think it's probably best to spell out, this is not a conversation that we really want to be having, but because of its profound impact on Manchester United, it's obviously a conversation that we need to have.
Yeah, ideally, this podcast, this sport, this club is supposed to be about escapism, right? From, your daily life and bring enjoyment, really, is what we try and do and have a laugh. But clearly at the same time, when you've got someone who is a co-owner of Manchester United, pretty big face of the club, usually it's the manager, right? But actually, Sir Jim Ratcliffe in the last couple of years has become one of the key figures talking around United, then we have to discuss it, right? It's had huge ramifications, both on the fans, I think, everybody connected to the club, but then also in a bigger sense, some of the more the grander issues that are at play with United. You've got the Prime Minister coming out and calling for an apology, Keir Starmer. Now, obviously, he's got his own feelings on that. There might be different, thoughts in his mind at play in that, but he's somebody that United are trying to get favour with for some investment on a new stadium. So we have to talk about it. And yeah, we appreciate everybody that's, made comments and what have you. We've certainly got strong feelings on it. I know I have, and we can get into it as we go along. But hopefully, listen, if this isn't your kind of bag, don't worry. We've got plenty of episodes that are your bag. But equally, I think we will have a really good conversation around this that hopefully can, I think, provide some, we want to try and provide clarity, but also a safe space for people to have this discussion.
Yeah, a huge reaction to this, obviously, not just in relation to the podcast and the club, but across society, really. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer's statement said that his words were offensive and wrong. Like Laurie said, he called for an apology, which Jim Ratcliffe later released a statement through the Ineos's website saying, sorry that my choice of language has offended some people, because it was obviously the use of colonised, which is obviously a very, very emotive term. Also, the Mayor of Manchester, Andy Burnham, who's been hugely involved in Manchester United's stadium project, said that Ratcliffe's views went against everything Manchester has traditionally stood for. And there was lots more comments along those lines from you as well. I must also say, from the other side of things, there's also been lots of comments supporting what Jim Ratcliffe has had to say. Certainly, Andy, in reaction to your article, which went up on The Athletic, the comments there were very mixed and lots of people with different opinions. There's been support from the Reform leader, Nigel Farage, who said that Ratcliffe was right. Also some support from far-right groups as well on social media. So, Andy, you have written a piece on it. You've reminded, really, Ratcliffe, I think, in that article about how important his words are and how now they are being viewed through the context of Manchester United as well.
Isn't it sad that we've got to even talk about this on a Manchester United podcast? But we've seen the strength of feeling and the reaction from the listeners and the viewers, people asking us to condone, to condemn. I wrote that piece in The Athletic the other day. I've been writing for The Athletic since it started in 2019. Never had a reaction as strong as that. I think there's something like 800 comments. And whether you agree with Sir Jim Ratcliffe or not, and there are plenty who do, and there are plenty who don't, it is an extremely emotive and divisive subject. I think that Sir Jim Ratcliffe realised he'd said the wrong thing. That's why he gave his modest apology. But as you touched on, Ian, the word colonisation, it's a loaded one, and he should get his figures right too. My main feeling when I heard it was he's the main decision maker at Manchester United, and his association with United only amplifies his words globally. You're not talking to your mates in a pub, nor the relatively small chemical industry. You're a person of significant interest, and you're going to be picked up, or what you say is going to be picked up by a large, diverse, global fan base. His words travel far, and with that comes responsibility. And I was also thinking that United fans asked for communication after 20 years of near silence from the Glazers. I don't think they expected it to be like this. So it's a pretty sad, it's a difficult situation. It's a very divisive and emotive subject, as we've all touched on.
Critch, you've written on The Athletic as well about the sort of wider conversation beyond football. Obviously, Ratcliffe is presented as a co-owner now of Manchester United, almost primarily, not a petrochemicals billionaire, founder of Ineos, one of the richest men in the UK, however else you want to describe him. It's Manchester United, which seems to be the link that's used in the headline. What do you think of the impact of what he's had to say?
I think that whenever we've tended to hear from Sir Jim Ratcliffe before, he's usually mentioned in these interviews how he keeps getting battered for any decision that he makes at United, that he takes so much flack. And then you have a period where they're unbeaten in 5 games. The manager he's appointed is doing very well. They've got almost 2 weeks without a game and a big empty space. And then he goes, opens his mouth and fills it with this stuff and brings undue, unnecessary attention onto the club and says a lot of things that people have, taken exception to. I think that he needs to recognise, as the lads have mentioned, that he might be a captain of industry. He might be one of the most successful British businessmen of his generation, and a figure that can be looked up as a successful entrepreneur. But he is the co-owner of Manchester United. And I don't know about you lads, but I think people care more about football than they do about hydrocarbons. That's just a fact. If you say something this controversial in your capacity as the owner of Manchester United, it's going to be viewed through that prism. And I think this is something that the club has been having to deal with over the past day since Ratcliffe's interview. The effect that it's had, I mean, we reported on The Athletic last week, myself and my colleague Adam Crafton did a piece just trying to gauge the temperature of inside the club and around the club in the wake of what Ratcliffe had said. And we were informed essentially that there was staff were going to people at United and making complaints about it over the course of Thursday. They were so disheartened by Ratcliffe's comments. The club received tons of emails from supporters, individual fans who were disgruntled with what had been said. They received one from the Fans Forum representatives who obviously weren't happy either. This is a story, I know that it seems like everybody else has had their say on it and now we're finally getting around to it, but it is a story that's going to run and run and run. And I think that there's going to be repercussions for United sponsorships. We know we did a piece on that recently, and just how they're struggling at the minute to convince these brands to sign up for partnerships. Now, brands want to be associated with organisations that are open, that are inclusive, that have a view of the world that is modern, and that wasn't reflected in what Ratcliffe said. There's the stadium, as Laurie's touched on as well. I mean, Andy Burnham has come out and given quite a strongly worded statement about his thoughts on what Ratcliffe said. Andy Burnham is the chair of the Mayoral Development Corporation, which is currently overseeing the Old Trafford regeneration. If there's one big issue facing the stadium at the minute, it's the fact that United need to acquire land so they can build it. The MDC, the Mayoral Development Corporation, has the power to essentially force sales of land through to help United do that. They need Burnham on side in order to get this project going, to get the wheels in motion. And yet you worry that relationship has been jeopardised by these comments as well. So it's something that didn't need to be said. It's something that has had a huge impact internally, externally, and something that probably isn't going to go away for a long while yet.
No, you mentioned the club, and in the end, the club did release a statement which didn't directly refer to what Jim Ratcliffe had to say, or even mention him by name. But they did say that United prides itself on being inclusive and a welcoming club, and pledging again to continue to represent our people, our city, our fans with purpose and pride. The thing is with the comments, Laurie, whether you agree with them or not, they do seem to jar with some of the fundamentals that make Manchester United Manchester United. There's that famous speech that Sir Alex Ferguson gave in the dressing room that Patrice Evra refers to, where he goes around the room and talks about this incredibly diverse, random group of people who've been brought together by Manchester United, coming together to win the Champions League final.
2008 Champions League final. I've already won.
People have shared excerpts of things that Eric Cantona had to say down the years from his book, I think, as well, where he talks about the pride he has of his grandma fleeing Franco's Spain to go to France, and the experience that he went through and how proud he is of being from an immigrant family. The fan base, the workforce, the current playing squad, whichever way you look at it, immigrants have their fingerprints all over the club. They've had a huge part in making Manchester United what it is. So it jars even in that sense, doesn't it?
Well, Eric Cantona being the player that Ratcliffe mentioned when sort of asked who was your favourite United player. Trawlers Limited, the company, the vehicle that he used to acquire the shares in Manchester United originally, you know, with a reference to the seagulls following the trawler. So I think it comes, there's an added element. So people can think whatever they like about what he said. There's another element on top of that, which goes towards hypocrisy from Ratcliffe, because he himself is a migrant in Monaco, and he's done that for tax reasons to avoid, to lower his tax burden on the UK economy. And now you can have a comment on what's happening in the UK. I think that's an issue for me. Also, how does he know about allegedly the UK being colonised by immigrants? Because, does he walk the streets? Is he a part of these communities that are having issues with immigration? Because obviously we have to acknowledge that there is I don't agree with it, but there's a kind of sway towards reform and Farage. There's certainly more spotlight being put on it right now.
Probably the biggest topic in UK politics currently.
Yeah, which unsettles me, to be honest. It would concern me if that happened. I would not want to be aligned with Farage. I could go further on that, but I think we'll leave it there.
That's personal politics.
It's a political thing. Back to the club element of it. To use a word colonised is just egregious, because the British Empire was built on colonising the world, basically. And a lot of these people that are in the country now are because of that programme by the British Empire to colonise different places. So it just really strikes a fundamental point, I think, that somebody of Ratcliffe's stature using that word in this kind of pejorative way, which I think is what has really antagonised people, understandably, myself included. When I saw that that's what he'd said, it was deeply concerning. The interview itself, is about, as Critchley's put on, as I said earlier, that sexy topic of sort of hydrocarbons and carbon taxes, really. So Ratcliffe is saying that, the petrochemicals industry is suffering in the UK, or maybe even in Europe, actually, because of the way that it's taxed and the difficulties that he has there. So that's kind of the first sort of 10 minutes of the interview. And Ed Conway, who's the Sky news reporter, does a really good job, because he does challenging him on the word colonised, by the way, and he goes back and repeats it. So he obviously, it's not a slip of the tongue. That is something that you've thought about, and that's your genuinely held belief. So that's something to consider when people are sort of saying it's perhaps clumsily worded. Well, and he's apologised for the words he used. Well, you used it twice. But then it's almost like he's kind of been getting angry as the interview goes on, when he's thinking about the ways that he's being taxed. And he says that it's not possible, it's unsavable, this kind of way that his industry is working. So then he kind of comes to this point, and it feels like you sort of see a figure in the background, and the interview kind of stops fairly abruptly after that. So you're sort of wondering if they acknowledge that maybe he's gone too far. But nevertheless, he said it. And as you say, guys, like, he is, this sort of figurehead. And so what he says has weight. You can't say this kind of stuff when you have Manchester United as your big flag in the ground, really. And he has said that he's been criticised for changes that he's been making at Manchester United, and that then adds another element to it, where you are talking about numbers the big one was the immigration, right, where he said that 58 million in 2020, now it's 70 million, 12 million in 6 years. It's just wrong, right? So he's talking about the year 2000 when he's talking about 58 million people. That's 20 years difference. It's alarming to me that you might genuinely have that belief that 12 million people have been added to the country in that span of time, because it's just not possible. And so is that kind of approach, maybe it was a slip of the mind and maybe he meant 2000, but he did say 2020. Is that kind of stuff then translating into United business? So when you talk about, I don't know, the price for a player or, a certain data point that he's certainly involved in, Ratcliffe, when he gets into United and the data aspects of different signings and recruitment. And then more broadly, perhaps even the redundancy scheme that happened. So, I think we can all agree that the club was too bloated and definitely had areas that they could be more economic with. And I don't want to, have some revisionism here where I say that, we didn't think that. But by the same token, I was speaking to people at the time and they were saying it's kind of arbitrary that the number that we're being told to cut the numbers with, so in the end it was 2 rounds of redundancies. It was like a third of the workforce, 1,200 down to sort of 800, and the reference point being perhaps Real Madrid. That's how many people they have on their staff. Well, it's actually a different way that United do things. So they've actually, at the time, they had catering in-house rather than outside sources. So you can kind of compare apples with oranges in a little bit of a way. So they're little points that this interview to me has just raised with, okay, we need to, perhaps we always knew this. It's not really a change from what he said previously in terms of immigration. It's just that now you've got the spotlight on it and he's used a very loaded term to make his point. But I think it does touch on different aspects that are relevant to United.
Yeah, in terms of him being a figurehead of the club, there was a statement from the Manchester United Muslim Supporters Club who said that someone like Ratcliffe saying this sort of thing risks legitimising prejudice and deepening division, in their opinion. They're deeply concerned by the remarks. The 1958 group called Ratcliffe a total embarrassment. There's a statement from Must as well that sort of outlined that no fan should feel excluded from supporting Manchester United. I mean, there was 2 things you mentioned before, Critch, which are almost fundamentals about how this type of statement is going to impact things that Manchester United are currently working on. Now, this is aside from maybe, the politics of it or the emotion of it, but practically the stadium and commercial sponsors. So you mentioned it before. How does this impact Manchester United now, do you feel, working on new commercial deals in terms of what this has done to the image of the club?
I think that, as I said before, I think partners, sponsors, brands, they want to be associated with something that is modern, that is forward-thinking, that is open, that is inclusive. The biggest companies in the world spend a lot of money on this sort of thing nowadays and, creating that image of themselves, and they want that image to be reflected within the organisations that they associate themselves with. I think it's hugely difficult for United to have the figurehead of the club go out and say this sort of thing, and how even not just potential partners and sponsors, but how their existing ones will react as well.
Well, I suppose the other factor is he only actually owns, or Ineos own, around 30% of the club.
That's
There's
true.
a big part of it that's not owned by him.
That's true, but he doesn't generate 30% of the headlines, does he?
No,
Let's say that he's not done 30% of the press briefings if we're splitting it like that between the ownership over the last 20 years. And one thing that we wrote about in that piece we did a couple of weeks ago was how, because of the decisions Ratcliffe has made, there's the numbers of staff on that commercial side of the business have been decimated, essentially. Laurie mentions it as well. So there's fewer people now around to manage those relationships. And a big part of those people's jobs was saying, well, you've got this off-field controversy going on, and this partner will come to you and say, what's going on about this? What's the club doing about that? They would manage that relationship. It was about making sure that people didn't, essentially get scared and run off because of things that were going on in the media, to say nothing of the results on the pitch at the same time if they weren't going well. Managing those relationships is a huge part of it. And because of the decisions the club have taken, rightly or wrongly, there's fewer people to do that now. So that is another element of it. So I think it all plays into that. And on the stadium, I mean, as I mentioned before, Andy Burnham is a huge key player in this stadium thing. It's not just that he was on the task force. I know there was a lot of media and publicity around the task force, but he is intimately involved in that wider regeneration project right now. So to be in a war of words with him is troubling as well. Rachel Reeves said it was disgusting. She described the comments as disgusting. It's her investment program, her infrastructure spending, which ultimately is going to go towards these projects, and that he's banking on, not for the stadium itself, we should say, for the wider things around it.
Yeah.
But that's a huge, important key plank of it as well. So it's all interlinked. And I know it becomes these sort of things. They're a story, they're a storm. Certainly, I can't remember the last Manchester United story, which was like leading Newsnight and had the Prime Minister commenting about it.
Question time.
And yeah, exactly. And
there has been a few, unfortunately.
Maybe a few, but this felt mega, to be honest. Like nothing else really. And maybe it'll die off a little bit, but these things aren't forgotten so easily. So it is going to run and run in that respect.
Andy, how do you think it impacts the stadium project and the landscape when it comes to building a new Old Trafford?
I don't think Andy Burnham's stance will change fundamentally. I've spoke to him about his views on helping Manchester United, and I think as a football fan, he would want to see what is best for Manchester United. But the words which Sir Jim Ratcliffe said, I don't think they help anybody. And if you're looking for taxpayers' support or even money, I can only see a downside of coming from what he says. I think he's just got to be aware that his words matter. He's a custodian, a man in charge of a club, or perceived to be in charge, the leading decision maker. And the fans don't have much choice in this, by the way. This isn't Real Madrid or Barcelona where you can vote for who's in charge. But that club, Manchester United, it is beloved by millions of people around the world. And with that comes responsibility. And there isn't a rule book as to what you can and what you can't say, but you've just got to be careful. And fans are interpreting it in very different ways. One of the great things about Manchester United or any football club is there's no barriers to supporting the club. Anyone can do it. Millions do. Doesn't matter where you're from, your religion, your politics, your geography, your social economic background. United crosses boundaries, and that is a wonderful thing. And fans are supposed to find joy, as Laurie said in the release of Sport and Football. I know it's been difficult the last couple of years, but look at the word, look at the name of the club, United. It should mean that we're united. And there's many times when Manchester United and the fan base is anything but united, but it's divisive, it's emotive, and I hope some lessons can be learned for this, if only for the benefit of Manchester United.
Yeah, the other thing that's concerning, Laurie, in some ways is that it ends up impacting what happens on the field too, because like Critch said at the top, this has been a very positive period. There's not been many of them just lately for the club when it comes to actually playing football matches, but 4 wins and a draw, the positivity that Carrick has brought and his team, the results, big statement wins over the likes of Arsenal, Manchester City. This gap really should be everyone reflecting on what's been good and pushing on again, really. The focus should be on football, not on these sort of topics.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean,
can we not be happy just for a little while?
Well, as Critch sort of mentioned, 2 weeks where we were thinking what we're going to discuss on this podcast, and here we go. I mean, players are pretty, driven individuals, so I don't suspect that they obviously will have discussed this, right? This, what Ratcliffe said. Obviously they are migrants themselves. Like, I don't think the kind of the migrants that Ratcliffe was probably referencing, but they will certainly have feelings about this. They've had, interesting journeys to get to this point. Football is pretty much a working class sport. When when you're a player, get a ball, kick it around a field. It's it doesn't cost that much money, but
don't
obviously
even need a field actually.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. So back on the streets, Wayne Rooney, Croxteth, but just a can of Coke,
screwed up piece of paper, yeah.
Can of Coke probably hurt a bit, wouldn't it? But
we've done it. Don't worry.
At least we've got some laughter on this podcast. Yeah. But they obviously have, they'll have feelings for sure. But I don't think that this would necessarily change their perception of Ratcliffe from what it already was. I don't think it's necessarily, you think about the time that he criticised the players' wages, and Bruno Fernandes kind of came out in a mix zone and was kind of pretty strong, saying, listen, you gave us these contracts, people at the club signed off, so you shouldn't really be talking about it now. The FA Cup final transport, the Europa League final transport, various issues that Ratcliffe has obviously had his fingerprints on, that the players probably would have gone, okay, interesting. So I don't think this topic will change the dynamic in the squad. Maybe even Carrick can use it a little bit and be like, listen, forget that outside noise, siege mentality almost, whatever it might be. But
Carrick's going to be asked about it as well the next time he speaks, yeah.
I mean, he'll straight bat it, won't he? He's been asked various questions already in his time.
This feels like a big one, though.
Do you think, what can he say, do you think? Do you think he'll have to take some kind of stance?
The club have made a statement. Yeah. I guess if he's aligned with that, then that's what he'll do. I don't know. I mean, it's up to him, isn't it? Yeah.
It's interesting. Ratcliffe has apologised, sort of, right? If you were offended by the language I've used, but he has said stuff where language should be actually really technical and specific. So going bust by Christmas is one that is in my mind where they were never going to go bust by Christmas. But I think he feels, fine. He's a billionaire, it's a different life than I lead, but it feels like he can say pretty much what he wants. But I think when you have Manchester United behind you and all the different people that really does matter to emotionally, then stuff like going bust by Christmas, saying the UK is colonised, I have concerns over that.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, we'll see obviously how this story plays out over the next few days and weeks and months and react to it when appropriate on Talk of the Devils. But let's talk about the football if we can. Feels a little bit trivial, to be honest, after that. But the women's team have had a very successful period. We should mention them. 7 wins in a row. Celebrations that reference things I'm not going to reference. But a 3-0 first leg win in the Champions League playoff away to Atletico. The second leg's at Old Trafford this week, so a fantastic chance to make it through to the quarterfinals for the first ever time for Mark Skinner's side. They're already in uncharted territories, even being in the Champions League in the first place, but it's brilliant to see their success. They followed it up with another win in the WSL at the weekend. They've got a big month. Next up is Chelsea in the 5th round of the FA Cup. Then Chelsea in their first ever League Cup final as well. And we'll talk more about that team in the coming weeks. Just look at the men's side of things then. I guess, Andy, the manager situation obviously is going to it's going to go on and on. We've already talked about it a lot, even in this space of these 5 matches that Michael Carrick's had in charge. But Thomas Tuchel agreeing a new contract with England, Roberto De Zerbi leaving Marseille. They are 2 names who have been linked with the permanent job at United. What have you made of the developments there?
I'd say that they were stronger than linked.
True.
Detailed talks took place with those individuals. The level of elite managers who are available this summer is changing with those 2, if they're both perceived to be elite managers. I'm pretty relaxed about seeing how Michael Carrick does. I think Manchester United will be doing their diligence, looking at the market. Like they did last time, they spoke to lots of people, and there'll be some left field names out there as well. But also half an eye on seeing how Michael Carrick does and what is a pass or fail mark for Michael Carrick, as if should he get the job permanently or not. But yeah, two of the potential future Manchester United permanent managers at this stage have been taken out the market. So where do you look to? There's not a huge number of people where I think Manchester United fans will go, oh, hello, I really fancy that idea.
No, yeah, well, De Zerbi's potentially more likely to take the job being available, and he wasn't thrown straight into Spurs either, where he'd been mentioned as a potential replacement there for Thomas Frank. It was Igor Tudor who's been given the job for the time being, which was an interesting appointment. I mean, when you look at Thomas Tuchel, it's not just the future job of managing Manchester United that was a topic of conversation. It was also the fact that he is beginning to look at Manchester United players again for his squad, which hasn't really been a thing throughout his time, short of Marcus Rashford. Kobbie Mainoo's back on the agenda, according to him. Harry Maguire, Luke Shaw as well. And that can only be a boost to those players to hear the England manager speaking about them again.
No, absolutely. I think it's a little bit of a surprise, to be honest, because I think looking at the way that Tuchel's operated, certainly over the last couple of camps, he was keeping a set of players in there and wanting to build this team ethos, almost like a club mentality.
Yeah.
And so you worried whether there'd be an opportunity for other players to make it into the mix. I guess those international breaks they were close together, weren't they? They were really focused on getting over the line in terms of World Cup qualification. There was a specific goal, and maybe there's been a bit more breathing room over the last few months. But it's great for Kobbie Mainoo especially, I think, because his chances a month ago looked absolutely dead in the water, didn't they? Unless he got that move. And now he's been, obviously such a topic of conversation since coming back into the team as well. I think Harry Maguire, been there, done it, has that level of experience. I'd be interested to see whether he fits into a Tuchel system, but I think everything that he's shown so far, I mean, he is just one of the defining characters of this last little generation of England players, isn't he?
He feels like an England player.
He just is an England player, yeah.
Even more so than a Manchester United player
exactly,
at times.
And like when in 2018, when England started to look all right again, he was suddenly a new face and a figurehead of it, and
positive one as well, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think
been a sanctuary for him in some ways.
Absolutely,
a couple of games aside, maybe.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember covering a couple of England games at Wembley where he was getting booed there as well, and sometimes it felt like United could be a sanctuary or England could be. It depended on where he was getting the grief from at any particular moment, but he'll be delighted. I'm sure that he's at least back in contention and back in the frame, and Luke Shaw as well. Obviously, I think probably his most consistent season, week in, week out, in terms of not just starts and appearances, but mostly performances as well for a long time. So absolutely, three players absolutely deserving of some recognition. We'll see whether once he announces his squad for the March internationals, whether they make it.
Yeah, and we hope the form continues along those lines as well, because that means that they're playing well for Manchester United. Just looking at the team then, what have they done across these few days? Because there was talk at one point of going to far-flung places for money-spinning friendlies or warm weather training or whatever it might be, but Carrick was very certain they're staying in Manchester.
Yeah, I mean, that was obviously something that was raised for commercial reasons before this season. Ruben Amorim said, yeah, we'll do it, basically. But I think as it's gone on, finding the agreements with different bodies has proved difficult, and United have probably taken a longer term view and thought, well, actually the Champions League money that we can get from qualifying is worth more than whatever it would be, 5-6 million at a time. I don't know.
Do you not think it's going to happen now then?
I would be surprised. I don't
really.
Yeah,
even in that huge chasmous gap in March.
There was something that's been discussed. I think would they have to travel? I think that's been a question.
I suppose there's international football in that break, but it's like 3 weeks without anything, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. I just think we would have heard by now that something. I've not heard anything, for a while that anything was particularly moving. So whether they've decided, listen, let's just make sure we've got the training on point so that we can then really solidify that Champions League place, and then that's the huge carrot at the end of the season. I think they were targeting Europe this season. Clearly then they adjusted their sort of landscape because of the fact of other teams not doing so well, not being so consistent. Jason Wilcox gave that talk to the players after they'd sacked Ruben Amorim to say Champions League is what we're aiming for now. There's an opportunity for us here. So I think things have shifted since they originally were looking at this prospect. But yeah, I mean, whether that means then that the guys, if Luke Shaw, Harry Maguire and Kobbie Mainoo can get that extra game in March, then that'll be interesting. I agree with Critch. I'm sort of surprised that Tuchel was so open to that. Probably
he has been watching them though. I think I've seen him at Old Trafford a few times. Remember the Everton game? He was around the tunnel area after the match, speking to the players from both sides. Yeah, God,
not a great example to.
No, maybe that's why they made the
audition.
I think they had an eye on him though.
Yeah, because when you think about Luke Shaw and who's up against him, Lewis Hall, Nico O'Reilly, maybe. I don't
Tino Livramento
can
play that side.
Lewis Skelly was there for a bit, wasn't he? But he's not playing regularly for Arsenal as well. So there's opportunities there, definitely.
Yeah, it'd be intriguing to see sort of what he does go for. I mean, even we go back to the United manager.
Again, do you want them to miss out and have the summer off and come back next season refreshed?
That's what I think most people would prefer, right? Kobbie Mainoo aside, I think people would appreciate that Mainoo would, I think,
benefit from the development of it.
I think he would love it. Maybe Shaw's did that in the last Euros, didn't he? Came back, and that I think antagonised some United fans, didn't it? So I could see maybe a more measured take on that one. But yeah, Tuchel signing his new deal at United, just to go back to that point, I think is
with England.
It's fascinating. Yeah,
that would have been a hell of an exclusive.
I just was always
it's not noticed, does it?
I was just always thinking that they'd already had these talks. It hadn't happened. I would just feel weird that he then comes back to it. I think once you've had that kind of discussion and it's not happened, maybe he said no, maybe United weren't offering the right terms, that park it there. Let's not try it again. Same with De Zerbi, in my opinion. Carlo Ancelotti's another one who we have reported on The Athletic, who we think is going to sign a new 4-year deal at Brazil, and he was somebody that was...
A 4-year deal with Brazil?
Yeah, 2030.
Wow, he's enjoying himself over there.
He is very much enjoying himself over there. I don't know if you've seen the recent pictures, but listen, it's carnival, you know. So it does. It's interesting where they go, you know, United on that front. But I mean, even Tuchel, he's a charming guy, isn't he? So when he was talking about the players, I think maybe is he just being open to that possibility, because he was even asked about Ratcliffe's statement, wasn't he? And he gave quite an interesting answer on that. So, but anyway, they're not joining United. You know, United players, will they get called up? Let's see, because it's a weird feeling, United players not being in the England squad. I know it's, you know, for United fans of a certain vintage, you know, United over England, absolutely, but it is a strange concept that you're not having United figures in that England team regularly.
I can't remember what the data was, but the data was like decades, basically, that there's not been a squad with no United players in, and now it seems to have been a regular thing across the last 12 months. Just talking about the weekend, Andy, really, it was the first one where there was no football for United fans. There's going to be a few of them in the weeks moving forward. I know you're working on an article, which we mentioned on the last show, about some of the stuff that people are getting up to if there's no football to watch. But all those FA Cup ties taking place, even a Premier League team playing away at Grimsby in bad conditions, all of it just felt cutting, didn't it, really?
Yeah, I was envious, and we've got to get used to this because we've got so many weekends. There's only 2, including last weekend, 2 of the next 8 weekends where Manchester United have got a game on a Saturday or a Sunday. And a push on from the fact that we're not in cup competitions or Europe is that games get put to a Friday night, such as Bournemouth away, which is a ridiculous time to play at Bournemouth away. What are fans doing? I spoke to lots of different people. You got fans going to random European games. You got fans going to more concerts. You got fans saving money because the ticket amounts not being debited from their account 14 seconds after Manchester United have progressed to the next round of the competition. I've had loads of fans say to me, "Give us a nod on the mid-season friendlies. When they're happening, where are we going? We're going Saudi. What's happening?" And as you've touched on, it's looking unlikely, because Manchester United feel it's working at the moment. The priority is European competition. The talk about the Champions League has been very real. There's 12 games left, 12 points behind Arsenal, so you've got to make up a point per game on average to pip Arsenal to the league title. Is it doable? Maybe not. It's a weird season, this, and I hope we don't have another season like it, because we're feeling not having the games, and it would have been lovely just to have a run in the FA Cup this season more than any other, and it's just not happening. And I don't know, we do different things with our lives, don't we? More time with family is not such a bad thing.
No, that's true. That's true. Lots of you got in touch as well to say what you're up to. I'm just going to read one out because it is quite pertinent after the end to the last episode. So this is from Kellen in Milwaukee, and it's important to note that it's Milwaukee as well. He said, "Chalk this email up to Manchester United less boredom, but I felt it needed to be clarified. Mitten Fest takes place in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and is an outdoor block party held in the dead of winter, typically in the frigid Midwest. Because of the cold, attendees are almost always found outside, sampling seasonal local beers, hot toddies, coffee, tea, etc., all while wearing mittens." So we can confirm it's got nothing to do with Andy Mitten and his global network. Milwaukee's often seen as Chicago's little brother, so I couldn't let this get by without some clarification. It's a great event put on by a local public radio station, funded by a whole bunch of local independent sponsors. And if you ever find yourself in Milwaukee during the football season, you'll be welcome with open arms. So Kellen, thank you very much.
Oh yeah, thank you
for that. It's a lovely message to get.
I could do a hot toddy now, you know.
Yeah. And I'm glad there wasn't an update on the headliners of that event, so I don't need to say that term again, which a lot of Americans needed explaining to them. We're going to leave it there on Talk the Devils. Thank you for your company, Critch, Laurie and Andy. Thank you for watching along and listening as well. We've got a very special episode of Talk the Devils Extra with Eric Steele, the former Manchester United goalkeeping coach, who covers absolutely loads of topics. It's a brilliant watch, and that'll be coming your way later on in the week. So get your notifications on, look out for that. Take care. Bye-bye. Thanks for watching this episode of Talk of the Devils. Don't forget to hit subscribe if you've not done already, like the video, and also get involved in the comments too, and click the bell to make sure that you never miss an episode with myself, Andy Mitten, Carl Anker, and Laurie Whitwell. There's also our social channels at TOT Devils on Instagram, X, and TikTok. Thanks for watching.